a boy casually threw a wooden stick and actually killed his playmate by accident. Watching Remy lying motionless on the ground, Frank was immediately terrified. He tried calling out his name, but Remy still showed no response. As a panicked little boy, his first instinct was to turn around and run away, but he hadn't run very far when he suddenly stopped because the scene before him gave him a bold idea. He dragged the body to a rock crevice. This location was very well hidden. As long as he didn't tell anyone, almost no one would be able to find this place. After finishing all this, Frank crossed the road and ran home. However, just then, he discovered his watch was missing, but he didn't dare go back to look for it. If someone saw him, there would be trouble. Meanwhile, Remy's mother had been unable to find her child for quite some time, so she came to Frank to ask questions, because the two boys often played together. To avoid being discovered, he deliberately pointed in the opposite direction. Soon news of Remy's disappearance spread throughout the entire town. Even the television was broadcasting missing person notices. What Frank feared most still happened. The next day, he was taken by police for questioning, but when faced with the police's harsh interrogation, Frank remained very calm, saying he only saw Remy pass by in front of his house and knew nothing else. Seeing they couldn't get any useful information, the police had to conduct searches around the town. But after all the searching, they still came up with nothing. On the third day, the town welcomed its annual Christmas Eve. Residents all came to the church to pray. Only Remy's father sat alone in a corner. But then his suppressed emotions erupted. For a father who had lost his son, everyone understood. So after the priest and residents discussed it, they decided to mobilize all residents to cooperate with police. Everyone gathered at the church entrance. Under police arrangement, they entered the surrounding forest to search, worried that his secret would be discovered. Frank also joined the search team, although the rock crevice was very well hidden. If they continued searching like this, it would soon be discovered. Seeing everyone getting closer and closer to the crevice, Frank's anxiety reached its peak. Unexpectedly at this moment, the lead officer stopped everyone. Since it was getting dark, they decided to continue the search the next day, and told everyone to go home and rest first. Although Frank escaped this close call, his heart was still filled with anxiety. He had planned to confess everything to his mother, but after hesitating for a while, he went back upstairs instead. When his mother saw her son, she also chose silence, seemingly lost in thought. Unexpectedly that night, something dramatic happened. Outside, fierce winds howled and lightning flashed with thunder. The town was hit by a once-in-a-century storm. Everything was devastated and left in ruins. This caused enormous damage to the town. Since everyone was busy with emergency rescue and disaster relief, the search for Remy was put on hold. Frank secretly went to the place where he hid the body. Looking at the rock crevice covered by trees, his long anxious heart finally found peace. 15 years passed, except for Remy's parents. No one mentioned Remy, who had disappeared back then, anymore. Frank also got together with Amy, whom he had secretly loved for years. He thought Remy's death would be completely forgotten, but what he never expected was, the town suddenly began a forest renovation project, which included the woodland where the body was hidden. Frank knew he couldn't just sit idly by, so he took action that very night. But when he arrived at the rock crevice, a terrible stench immediately emanated from inside. Remy's jacket still hadn't decomposed. Frank picked up a shovel, trying to get that conspicuous blue jacket out, but because the rock crevice was too narrow, he tried several times without success. The light from his flashlight also attracted lumber workers to the area. Frank didn't hesitate when he saw this, and quickly grabbed his tools and fled the scene. Little did he know, the workers would soon discover his hiding place. The next day, the mayor held a press conference, confirming that the body in the crevice was indeed Remy. According to the autopsy report, Remy was struck by a blunt object like a stone or stick. Clearly this was not an accident, but murder. The medical examiner also found a strand of hair. After testing, the hair came from a male, but unfortunately, the hair owner's DNA was not recorded in any database. Remy's father was very agitated after hearing this, demanding that all residents undergo DNA testing, but the mayor found this very difficult. Large-scale testing would be extremely expensive, and the hair's owner might just be a passerby, or the killer might just be a vagrant. The town didn't have the resources to investigate this case. Frank breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, thinking the matter would just pass. But the next day, Frank had just arrived at work when a driver from town approached him and handed him an electronic watch. This was exactly the one he had lost in the forest years ago. It turned out that 15 years ago, when Frank was heading home after hiding the body, a car happened to pass by. Although Frank hid behind a large tree, the driver recognized him immediately. The reason the driver didn't expose him was because the driver had long been interested in Frank's mother. But at the press conference, seeing Remy's parents' devastated state, he still hoped Frank would voluntarily turn himself in to police. Otherwise he would spend his whole life in regret and anxiety. Just as Frank was anxious about this, his girlfriend told told him she was pregnant. This made him somewhat hesitant, because if he turned himself in, the child would grow up without a father. Frank ultimately chose not to turn himself in. At the end of the story, Frank's family was having a happy dinner together, but only Frank himself could understand that beneath his seemingly happy and perfect exterior, his heart endured tremendous pain every single day.